Hello, everyone. It's Heather with Leaders of the Heart podcast, and I'm super excited to have as my guest 3 years later the Mr. Rich Gassen. And Rich has been, he was on the show a few years ago. He made his way in the book with a couple amazing stories that he told. And I just thought we needed to retell them as learning experiences in that book, and continues to be, just a friend and a supporter and somebody that's really ingrained in the caring leadership community. So welcome, Rich.
Thank you, Heather. I'm glad you could have me back.
Absolutely. Anytime I can connect with you and just you and I one-on-one, it's always a good gift for me. So I would definitely appreciate you being here. I want to do like a reflection. I wanted to like have this be a conversation. I may do more of these, but you're the first. I just thought, it'd be kind of cool to do it.
Mhm.
Reflecting back on kind of the leader you've become over these last 3 years, and some of the learning lessons, some of the stories, and maybe even reflecting back on some of the learnings you had back then, and then how either if they've changed since then, or if the people that were in those stories have changed, there have been differences. I don't know. I think that's interesting. That way people could go back to listen to that episode a
Sure.
few years ago and then be like, wow, I really see a difference. Like me personally, being around you now these last years, around you, obviously LinkedIn wise and all the Zoom
Mhm.
calls we're on together, I have seen a huge difference in you and in your growth and everything. And so I'd be curious to have everybody else kind of have that same experience. So let's do that.
Sure.
Let's talk about that. So what do you, when we think back then, I feel like there was a level of, um, not Pollyanna is not the word, but it's kind of like this newness in a way, kind of like a
Mhm.
newness and a bright-eyedness about your leadership when I talked to you a few years ago. And I now, over these last 3 years, what I've seen is like this level of maturity. And of course, that's because of wisdom and experience, right? More of it just
Mhm.
coming more and more into it. But what have you seen and felt in these last few years when you think back at that original conversation?
Sure. Let's go through that. First of all, for listeners, let's go back and say they should catch up on episode 32. That's how long ago it was that we talked. It was back in the fall of 2018. I had been supervising at UW-Madison in the print production area since 2012, and I've been working here since 2010. So I had taken over a supervisor position from a gentleman who had been here for many, many years and was very set in his ways, and kind of had different ideas on how to lead groups. And it was my first time in a management role. And basically, I was coming up with the way I wanted to lead based on how I had been led in previous jobs. So I had experienced very great leaders and managers in previous situations. And of course, I had experienced some not so great situations or managers. So I kind of formed my leadership style out of how I wanted to be led prior to that. So in many cases, I was, being a little more flexible and a little more lenient with people with scheduling than the previous managers had been here, for example. And obviously, the university has some policy around absenteeism and so forth, but we were able to at least be more flexible with start times and schedules and things like that. So, over the first few years, I had some bumpy times with some staff that were either accustomed to the old way or were a little bit against the process that I was going through. Um, there was a couple of management changes up above me that over time helped me um, kind of go with what I was trying to do with my team and make some more changes. We went through a lot of process improvement initiatives to find efficiencies in the way we did things, to do a lot of cross training with staff over the span of several years. When I first started here, many of the staff members um, only did one or two of the types of things that were available in our production facility. So we got to the point that most people could do most of the items. Some people could do everything in the shop. And I had a team that could pretty much take care of anything in the room at any time based on whoever was in the space. So it gave me more flexibility on allowing people to take vacations, have sick time, et cetera. And we were just able to be a little more agile and flexible in everything that we did. Um, at about the time that you and I spoke 3 years ago, I came through a little bit of a health scare, and that definitely changed my outlook on life and leading. I became much more empathetic. I have a lot more gratitude in my life now than I did before. But I lead the whole person a lot more than I probably used to. And I see their situations and, life outside of work more than even I did back then. And you and I had talked 3 years ago about a story of one of my staff members who was a football coach, and he was struggling with communication styles with some of the parents of the team and things like that. So he had gone through some extracurricular training here for communication styles and conflict management, and he's actually succeeded very well in the last several years. He's moved around to a couple of different schools in the Madison area. Now he is the freshman coach at Monona Grove, and he's doing very well. So seeing kind of people's needs even outside of the workspace was something that I was, whether it was that they needed more training or they just needed more flexibility because of a family situation. I've really tried to accommodate those types of needs for people over the past few years. And that's definitely an area where I've grown a lot. And then, of course, you probably know we had a little pandemic here over the past 18 months or so, which drastically changed the way businesses functioned. We're able to, stay open. Luckily, we pivoted at the time of in March and April of 2020 from mostly doing print work prior to that to then creating some PPE products, some face shields, and some masks for the local hospitals. We made over 60,000 face shields in the span of about 8 months. And of course, then the print work started to come back, but we had to do that in order to be able to stay functioning here, prove our worth, and the fact that we were an essential business providing services to campus. So being agile and flexible in those environments was a very important trait to have as a management team here. Unfortunately, after that, we did have to lay off some of our staff just because the work never really came back to the level that we had hoped to. So since then, we have been functioning at about 50% of the labor force that we had pre-COVID. The good news is we're getting busier. So now we're at that point where we are up against the amount of work versus the labor that we currently have. And it's a little more challenging to solve the daily puzzle of work, where I used to have a dozen people in the room that could do any one task or several tasks. Now you might have a few different people in the room that can run a certain piece of equipment. So the puzzle's a little harder to solve, but we're still getting it done. And the outlook is good for the future to have us start growing again to the point that we could bring some individuals back into the shop. So.
It's interesting. When I hear all of this, what makes me think of is we talk about this idea of adversity making us stronger, and making us grow, taking us outside that comfort zone. And I think this is an example of it. Again, I think between the health scare, the pandemic, like the level of growth that I've seen you as a leader, the level of maturity, it's different. Again, so I definitely want you to go to episode 32 and listen, because you will hear the difference in the person you are. You were obviously you're wonderful back then, or you wouldn't have been in my book, right? You're wonderful, and you're wonderful now, right? But it's just amazing. And I think also, like at that moment, your network wasn't as big, even thinking like on LinkedIn, and you weren't as aware, I think, of your own power, in my opinion, as I think back on that. And now I realize, I see that there's more of an awareness of your superpowers, but I think it was the adversity that got you there. I don't know. Tell me what you think about that.
I would definitely agree with that. And the other thing that we talked about a few years ago was I've kind of been a lifelong learner. I went back to college at age 40. I switched jobs, and then I got into this management role. And I have continuously sought out materials, podcasts, connections like yourself and others to find information about leading and helping me do a better job. And I'm also part of a group on campus called the Campus Supervisors Network. This is a group of managers and supervisors. There are 1,200 of us in the email list, and we the planning committee for this group puts on trainings and conferences and discussion groups and book clubs, all about many different topics about leading staff on campus. So for me to be part of that planning group, finding the information to share with others is also letting me digest that information and learn from it. One of the biggest steps I took after we had talked was we had done a book club on Drive by Dan Pink, and myself and one other person on campus decided to present at a leadership conference here on campus about that topic. And that was a big stretch for me because even though I was comfortable speaking with others in small groups, I wasn't really very comfortable with public speaking. In fact, it scared me a lot. So for me to commit to that and work up to the point of doing a presentation for about 100 people at a conference was a really big growing step. And ironically, the person that was going to do the presentation with me the day before went into the hospital for emergency surgery. So instead of it being a pair where we intended to kind of just have a conversation with each other in front of a bunch of people, that was my way to kind of alleviate the stress of having that presentation. She had to back out, so I had to take on her content as well, and gave the presentation, and it went just fine. Just like, I mean, you've done thousands of these by now. You know what it's like, the anxiety and the excitement before you get up in front of a crowd. So I had a lot of encouragement from other people that were at the conference. Again, connections of mine that I continue to share information with. So it went really well. And from there, that was kind of the launching pad where now with Campus Supervisors Network, I've done a lot more facilitating with some of those groups. And usually those are groups of 20 to 40-ish. When we do a book club, for example, you might have 40 or 45 people total. So we'll facilitate in a large group, we'll break into small breakouts, and maybe I'll run, a dozen people in a small breakout group. But all of those times of doing that, you grow a little bit every time you take on a presentation or you speak at a different, conference and things like that. So those have been some kind of big milestones for me over the past several years. And the Campus Supervisors Network itself, leading that group and the management group, the planning committee that's part of that are superpower people on campus as well, from all over different parts. We've got people in the hospital area, people in other academic parts. The campus is really interesting because if you think about a university, we're really like a small city. We have everything here except a fire department, really. We have police force and all of the different things that a small city would have. And there's over 20,000 employees here. So the management teams that are in these different units end up having very diverse experiences and backgrounds as well. So for us to share information with each other, you get to grow outside of the area that you work in, and you see all of these other experiences, challenges, and whatever that these other people have as well. So those are really the major things that I have put myself into to grow and develop more as a leader over the past several years. But as you hinted on earlier, I think the illness and the pandemic definitely were major changes. And for many people, obviously, the pandemic itself, work experiences have changed drastically. Some people have lost jobs. Other people have been able to move through or even advance depending on a situation that they were in. Those have definitely changed the way I see the team and the way I treat people, and try to be as empathetic and accommodating as possible with the team these days.
I think about that lifelong learner thing. I agree. When I think of lifelong learner, I think of you and Mario McCracken. Those are the two. I think of you two as the ones that are the lifelong learner, just always seeking out more information, just always trying to share other people's stuff and learn more and get better. And I just really value and appreciate that. I think we just need more people like that. I even try my hardest to look and peek at more people's stuff, taking the time to do that, because there's so much content that we generate. And it's like, okay, take a break and let's look at someone else's stuff and try to share more items from other people instead of generating so much content. So we try to do that on our end too. But just even thinking about, the Campus Supervisors Network and that role that you play. And I think about this idea of leadership, and it's like without a title. You obviously have a supervisor title, but it's not like you're some top level executive. It's not like you're like a CEO of an organization. You show up as the leader with heart. You show up as the person who is helping others grow and learn. We're managing a print shop. And I think that's not lost on me, and I hope it's not lost on the listeners, that I'm not always trying to highlight folks that have some like big lofty titles that work with. This is a large organization, but in the role that you have, it's not some massive undertaking with thousands and thousands of people that you're actually leading, right? But you still are saying, I'm growing as a leader, and I've seen it. I'm growing other people, and you've seen the people that have grown underneath your leadership, and then thinking about how much more how much more influence you're having now when you're doing these presentations, doing these facilitations, the level of influence you have. And it's not about your title. It's about your desire to learn first, and then to help others learn and grow, were the main focuses that you had that helped you have the influence you have, which I think is critical, because I think we stop ourselves so much because we think we don't have this authority, we don't have this title. And I think that's hogwash.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that if you put yourself into a situation where you're interacting with someone, you ask, how can I help this person? You're basically a natural leader in that environment of, I want to better this person. I want to provide for them whatever they need. I've been in this customer service type role all of my adult life in print shops. So even though I wasn't a manager prior to this role that I'm in now, I was serving the customer in whatever way I could. And so I was a natural leader in kind of lead worker type roles for about 20 years. When you put the title on top of it, then you get to do timesheets and you do interviews and all those other great things that a manager gets to do. But I was also able to branch out into the other areas of campus because of the supervisor network. And be able to provide services and trainings and facilitations for all of these different people on campus. So there's some gratification in being able to do that for people. But really, it's how can I help these people grow and learn and become better leaders as well. So much of the material that I have curated and located on LinkedIn and other resources, I find it so invigorating and interesting that I'm compelled to share it. Your material was one of the first things that it was the reason I reached out to you originally. Your first book, Seven Intuitive Laws of Employee Loyalty, I used that in materials that I presented to a small group about employee,
Recognition or
recognition. Thank you.
yes.
I was doing recognition and appreciation discussions with some campus leaders. And so I used quotes out of your book, as well as Brave Leadership from Kimberly Davis and a few other materials as the resources for that training. And that was when I got to know you on LinkedIn, and we started to have conversations. And of course, it bled into you eventually inviting me to be on your podcast. And at that time, quite honestly, I think I even replied to you saying, I'm just a first line manager at a print shop. I'm not, Gary Ridge, CEO of WD-40, or some of these other very high profile people that you had on your show. So I even questioned myself at that point of, why me, right? But obviously you saw something in there that was worth talking about. But I think over the span of especially the last few years, as I've done more and more for the Campus Supervisors Network, as well as leading the team that I'm leading here in the print shop, I've grown a lot because of my interest in finding more. And one thing that I'll lay claim to there is that I don't just try to dig in and find stuff specific to what I'm currently doing. I look for things that are of interest to me outside of the area that I know as well. So I've, experienced different materials from Sarah Elkin's book on storytelling is a great example of a better storyteller can communicate better. So learning how to communicate better is a goal of mine. Finding different resources on emotional agility was one from Susan David is the author of that book, talking about how do you handle your emotions better. So that's kind of your own personal growth, self-leadership, improvements that you can do, all kinds of different things where it's not just how do I manage this team better, kind of explicitly. I'm looking for a variety of different things that might help me and might help others as well. We've definitely delved more into the mental health side of things, as the anxiety and stress of working from home or remotely, or coming back to work. There's been a lot of discussion on campus here over the last several months about returning to work and the stresses of that. So many resources around that were collected, and we had some discussion groups over those things as well. So, and while they don't necessarily affect me directly in every case, it's worth learning about it and being able to talk about it or share it with others so that you can understand their situation if they are experiencing anxiety, for example, over the return to work.
Mhm.
Um, so those have been some big things for me, I think, over the last few years, is kind of the empathy and compassion for others' situations all over the campus, as
Yeah.
well as my team, my team itself, the challenges that they've been through with the changes of less staff, trying to get, more work done in some cases, challenges of juggling schedules. Many of them had children that were homeschooling or, remote schooling for a time during this. So all of those challenges considered, um, definitely been some growth over the past few years. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot
yeah.
of that. Well, I am curious. So now we're at the point of the show where if you had any questions of me, you kind of turn the tables and ask me, is there something that, it could be anything actually. So,
Mhm.
anything you'd like to ask me, turn it on me, ask me, and then I'll do that. And then we'll kind of wrap up with your pearls.
The question I would have for you is, I've seen you grow quite a lot as well over the past few years. You had a TED Talk that was very popular. You've obviously published this book, The Art of Caring Leadership, last year, and the products and services that you've offered along with that book have definitely changed your direction for a business model and the way you interact and communicate with others as well. So I'm curious
Mhm.
how that has affected you from, I know you hint on this a little bit, but from like a personal level or from a family level, how has the growth and explosion of your business changed how you perceive, home life, the whole picture,
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the model change of, or, it's like part of the model stayed, and it was just an addition of a model. So yes, I did expand during the pandemic. So I hired two team members, Monica and
Hmm.
Ashley, and then of course I hired some other contractors. So the team expanded. I knew I needed to do that because I was really minimizing my effectiveness. I was just trying to do too much. All the stuff that was happening before that, I was mostly doing, or I had like a contractor here and there helping. So I knew I needed to do that. So I did do that for more balance because I knew I was going bonkers trying to do it all.
Sure.
At the same time, I had bigger dreams for myself. And so I also knew that that would limit my ability to get there if I was trying to do it all myself. So that was there. Now, having said that, as it relates to family, for many years, I wanted to do the speaking front, and I kept saying, I'm just not going to do it. I have four children. I can't like put that much time into trying to market it and go travel everywhere. I can't leave them because they're my priority. They're
Hmm.
there. My faith and my family come first. And so, then I said, well, wait a second, like I can choose to say no. I could block my calendar. I could say no on this. I can say no on that. So once I changed my mindset about, okay, the things that I'm doing relate to model change or like more speaking, and then having now the online academy and all of the stuff that we do, it was like, how do I do it where I get more time back, where I don't have to be as present at every engagement? Because right now it is all me, and I'm working towards making some passive sources and bringing in other trainers that help out. And
Hmm.
so, but it really is all about how do I keep my sanity, so mental health, and how do I keep the ability still to like take kids to school or like be there and not be gone all the time. And that's really the end goal with all of it. So
Sure.
yeah, it's been good, been good. I like someone said to me, actually the publisher, Steve Parasanti said, Heather, after I did one talk, and he said, you're such a star, but you're so relatable. And I work really, really, really hard at maintaining my relatability.
Hmm.
It's not just a personal brand, but it's a congruency factor.
Hmm.
And so I think we talk about that, right? I talk about that in the first chapter of the book of like, how can we be congruent with who we are at the same time? How can we continue to, reach for goals and not get out of sync with that? And so because that's such a North Star for me, every decision I make has to point back to, okay, does that allow me to keep what I value, which is my relatability, my connectedness, my closeness to people? And if I get to the point where I can't be that thing, then I got to let it go.
That's
So,
great.
yeah.
You said a couple things there. You said no more often, and you started to delegate. Those are leadership traits that we all grow into at some point. I definitely learned those two things myself over the past several years too. The other thing that I did actually several of the book clubs that we've featured at Campus Supervisors Network talked about core values and making sure you know your personal core values as well as the business's values. So I've done several different assessments to figure out what my core values are. I just did the Clifton Strengths Assessment,
Nice.
thanks to our mutual friend Tom Dietzler, who sent me a book, and then our friend Sarah helped me coach through the my top 5 strengths there. I've done some other types of assessments like that, so I can list my personal values, and
Mhm.
anytime an opportunity comes up for me, I do the same thing as you now. Is I weigh whether that fits into my value set and whether it's going to take away from the other priorities that I've already committed to. But I definitely, when I first started supervising here, I was a yes man, and anybody at any department that asked for something, I would, yes, I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll be on that committee. And honestly, I was on a Partners in Giving committee here for 2 years at UW. And it was a great experience for me to network with other managers in different parts of campus. But these days, I'm choosing the Campus Supervisors Network and a couple of other initiatives that have more personal value to me.
Mm.
And I know they will help me develop and grow as an individual. So you've done obviously that same thing where
Mhm.
I attend most of your weekly community calls for the Caring Leadership Community Group. And you've allowed other coaches to run those meetings because you're busy and you might be traveling to a speaking event or something. So, you let go of the reins a little bit in those environments so that you can prioritize and take on some of those other things. So, delegation is a huge part of growth for managers. And actually, Robert Glazer, who was the author of a book, Elevate, that we did a book club on a couple of years ago, or last year, I guess. He talks about if something can be done at 85% of the level that you expect, then you should be delegating it. So as a leader, you should be handing off anything that can be done at that level or better. And not, nitpick about the fact that, oh, I would have done it a little bit differently. You say, nope, it's 85% as good as what I would have done, or it's, slightly different, but it's okay. You should be delegating that and taking on something else that's more in line with, your level of leading. So I've definitely absorbed some of that information from him and other people about trying to, and obviously delegation is also empowering the team to grow and develop more skills. When we started the pandemic, the management team here in my office, there were 3 managers, and we were rotating as duty manager on site, and the other 2 were working remotely. So I ended up with one of my staff members was kind of my right-hand man, who I communicated directly through him in many cases to the rest of the team for, basic communication of certain projects. So he grew quite a lot over the span of 6 months or so while I was working remotely part-time, because he took on sort of an assistant manager role, if you will, in the shop. And so all of those situations are, ways to improve, make the processes a little bit better, but also the people are improving in their abilities along the way. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
empowerment is really critical, and
Mhm.
I really focus on that. Sometimes I might delegate too much, but it's the empowerment that I'm really looking for. I'm really trying to look at the self-actualization side of like, how can I get them to the place where they feel like they're in their zone and they're feeling super excited? Because if what I notice is some people really love like scheduling and like the details, and I want to put people in there that like doing that stuff. Because if I put
Mhm.
someone in there that doesn't want to do too much of that. They like details, they like different, they like tech detail, whatever it is, right? Figuring out what that is and saying, okay, you go over here because I think you're going to shine more. We're going to do better as an organization and you're going to do better as a person if I do that. So yeah, I really like to focus on that. But of course, I do the delegation side too. But I don't see them
Mhm.
exactly the same. I don't see them
Right.
exactly the same. So I try to do both. But okay, so now we're at the point where we ask, what are those when we think now over the last few years? um, I can't even remember what you said because I didn't have time to look. What you said was your pearl of wisdom, your 2 pearls of wisdom at the end of that podcast. But what would be a couple of your pearls of wisdom now when we think about what we need to help leaders get through their week, reinvigorate them, just feel like they're grow? What would be the things that you'd be focusing on?
Well, the one thing that you titled my last podcast, Show Up and Participate, which has kind of been a mantra for mine ever since I was working as an adult. But it was kind of my mantra when I first started here and had a challenging group. Just show up and participate, contribute something to the group. Let's see where we can go. So I think that when people show up and they're their full selves, there's the possibilities just grow immensely. If they're checked out or they physically don't show up, obviously that's a problem. But if they're here and they're not interested in doing what the team is trying to accomplish, it's very hard to move forward. I was discussing with a group the other day that we talked about a crew members in a boat where you get 8 people in a boat trying to row. If they're all rowing in the same direction, they can do amazing things. But if any one of them is pushing the other way, it really can rub on the group and have some very big effects in the negative side of things. So just continuing to show up and participating and contributing. I think throughout the pandemic, I kind of changed I used to say, as close to perfection or excellence as you could get. I now kind of throw out process or progress over perfection is our new kind of quote. Let's see what we can get done today. If you might have less staff in front of you, or there's too much work to get done, what can we get done? Can we make progress on anything? And especially when people were having challenges, mental health days or whatever, where they didn't feel motivated at all. It's like, just do one small thing. And that's what our goal is for today. And you'll accomplish that. So I think the last tidbit that I'd give is just continue to seek out new information. I've read so many books over the last several years, but finding new material. I constantly have a book on my bedside that I'll catch a chapter or so. Right now I'm reading Anxiety at Work by Chester Elton and Adrian Gostick, which is a fantastic book. And again, I'm learning a lot from it about what my team might be going through and whether they're talking about it or not, and ways that I might be able to bring some of those topics to the forefront and hopefully help improve their situations at work. But little things like that, just making sure that you're staying fresh, finding groups like yours where you have this fabulous community with many coaches and other people sharing information. I personally have found that I learn a lot more in discussion groups and book clubs and those types of environments than I do just reading material. And I think that's a proven fact that when you're intimately involved in a conversation or interaction with people, you're going to digest and learn more about that information than if you just read it online or in a book. So seeking out those types of resources as well would be my advice for people. So
it's so funny. So with some things, they stay the same and some things change. And in this case, I think the advice or the feedback is probably the same, but how you, walk it and talk it now is quite different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, it's just kind of cool for me to be able to see the evolution, and for anybody else who's watching from afar, it's been pretty cool. And so I want to thank you for coming on for sure.
Oh, you bet. My pleasure.
And for those who are listening and you found it, a lot of just good tidbits in here. And first, number one, go back and listen to the episode number 32 and Rich Gassen's original podcast with me, and see just maybe how both of us have grown. And then at the same time, share this far and wide, because that's how we get more people learning, and also helps us in the algorithm. So more people listen, the higher up we go. And we really are going up. Actually, funny enough, we are in Belgium, we're like really top management. In the US, we're at like the 80th spot or something like that. So that's pretty good when you look at all the leadership and management podcasts out there. So we're moving up, and that's awesome. Don't forget to write a review too on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen, because that also helps. But I really am, my heart is connected to yours, Rich. I really appreciate you being here. Yes. And just being around in my universe is, I'm super thankful for that. So again, thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for your friendship as well. You have actually looked out for me when I was going through my illness. And after that, I'd get text messages from you directly, which I don't get those from a lot of my LinkedIn connections. So, your level of caring leadership and friendship is above and beyond what I would ever expect from an online connection. So I appreciate you as well.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks everybody for listening to the Leadership Power Podcast. Be well.